time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. It is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a day of remembrance, a day to think back and remember the history of the country, a day to think about African American history, a day to think about the civil rights movement, a day to, well, think about the history of America. And I know I'm going to get some, are you talking, that theory about race that's critical? Kind of talking about actual history. And kind of what made me back in 2015 pack up the kids and the show and head out on I think we were almost a month we were on the road, traveling throughout the southern U.S., looking for history, going to the places across the South where we treated black people really, really poorly. And in those places now, we have tourism. It's almost like, hey, come see how bad we were. See how bad we were to people, how we mistreated people, and just how bad we did. And I remember when we started. Now, as a white guy, I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, a minority in a minority community. I had always thought that I had kind of an understanding of race relations, of the tensions between blacks and whites and the fights that went on. It wasn't until I did that tour, and look, I was well into my I was older, let's put it that way. It wasn't until then that I really realized just how bad our history was. And the images that we saw, the places that we visited, the people that we spoke to, the stories, and understand, this wasn't ancient history. This was in a lifetime. This was, people sharing their lived experiences. And I remember going to Birmingham, Alabama, where some of the worst things took place. And I remember looking at the door to the cell where Dr. King was held, and behind that cell door wrote letters from the Birmingham jail, and putting my hands on that cell door and thinking about what that meant and how far we've come as a country and how much further we need to go, and the divisions that it's caused and what it meant to everyone. And the thing that kept coming up in our trip is that race was always used as the dividing tool to keep people against each other for economic purposes. And for me, it's always been about the economy. It's always been about ensuring that people can put food on the table, keep a roof over their head. Anybody who's watched this show or listened or paid attention to us over the years knows that that's the focus. I've always believed it's not about white or black. It's not about red hat or blue hat. It's about green. It's about money. It's about the economy. It's about workers getting a fair share of the wealth that their labor creates. It's about ensuring that families have enough food to put on the table, about kids having opportunities. It's about that American dream. It's about that thing that I grew up believing in as a kid, that if you worked hard, you played by the rules, that you got ahead. And race was one of those things that was always there to divide us, to pit us against each other. And it was convenient because it was always there. And we went to a place in Tennessee where, if the white miners went on strike, the governor would send in the convicts, because they had a convict lease program where they'd send in the convicts to break the strike. And the white miners would be mad because you got these black miners coming in, taking their jobs, without understanding that, hey, these are prisoners that are being marched in here, being sold to these companies. And it's really it's the wealth class. It's the moneyed interests who are screwing both sides over. And what I came away with, and what I come away with every time I sit down and I think about this, is the sooner we heal this division, the sooner we figure out how to bridge this gap, the sooner we're able to unite and go after the real problems. And that's the people who have been lining their pocket at our expense. And Dr. King understood that. I mean, I found it interesting that, when you go to his center in Atlanta, that, Coca-Cola is right across the way, and, big sponsor, and lots of money went in there. When that's the target of who he was going after. What good is it that you can sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford to buy a hamburger? What good is it that you have rights if you don't have the ability to participate? And that's always made sense to me. So for me, on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I always read the letter from the Birmingham jail. That's one of those things that where my mind goes. And I think about that history tour. Never meant that much to me before that tour. But going and being in those places and hearing those stories, it changed me. And this is why I think history is so important. Why I think actual, real history, not propagandized nonsense like we see coming out of certain talk show hosts, little university things, but actual history, lived experiences. That's important. And on this day, I hope people will take the time to, read the letters. Read the letter. It is fairly lengthy. And think about, how do we heal this rift? And how do we bridge this gap so that together we can move forward and grow and quite frankly, how do we get to a position where we go, you know what? We're going to go after the real culprit in all this. For me, that's where I want to go. But today, for the holiday, I want to talk to my good friend, former Alabama Senator Doug Jones. Doug is, an icon in the civil rights arena. As a federal prosecutor, went after the people who bombed the 16th Street Baptist Church. So when we come back, Doug Jones will be here to share some thoughts on the day. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day that black labor leader A. Philip Randolph issued a call for a march on Washington. He proposed the march to bring attention to the employment discrimination faced by African American workers. World War II was being waged across the globe. U.S. industries were booming. Tanks, planes, weapons, and munitions rolled off production lines. From 1941 to 1945, the United States would export more than $32 billion in goods as part of its Lend-Lease program to Allied forces. It was also becoming more and more likely that the U.S. itself would enter the fighting soon. Thousands and thousands of workers found employment as demand for labor soared. The young aircraft industry saw a staggering growth of more than 13,000% during the war. But many black workers found themselves shut out of many segments of this growing economy. The Lockheed Aircraft Corporation, to take one example, had 0 black workers on their assembly lines in 1941. A. Philip Randolph had risen to national prominence with his successful organizing of the Black Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union. Now he turned his attention to war industry discrimination. He declared, "Negro America must bring its power and pressure to bear upon the agencies and representatives of the federal government to exact their rights in national defense defense employment and the armed forces of this country. He continued, I suggest that 10,000 Negroes march on Washington, D.C. with the slogan, "We loyal Negro Americans demand the right to work and fight for our country." His declaration helped to launch a movement. His call for 10,000 marchers grew to a call for 100,000. The threatened march successfully pressured President Roosevelt to issue an executive order to desegregate war production. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, the importance of this holiday, this is one of those holidays that it's easy to not think about the importance of. And for me as a labor guy, when we did our labor history tour and we did our civil rights tour, civil rights played a lot into that. The idea that race was used as a divider. It was used to keep people apart so that we were fighting each other instead of the bosses and the moneyed interest, and that was all part of the gig. That was part of the game. That was one of those moments that you go, this is why we need to be, if not just to do the right thing, this is why we need to be coming together. And here to share some thoughts on why Martin Luther King Jr. holiday is so important and why this day is something we should be paying more attention to. I've asked our good friend, former Alabama Senator Doug Jones, to spend a little time with us and share some of his thoughts. Doug, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, it's always great to be with you, especially on a special weekend like this day. It's always good to be with you.
So this is one of the holidays that, I don't know that gets enough attention. I think it should. Like all holidays, there's a reason that it's special. But I don't know that we give this one the reverence and the celebration I think that it deserves. Or do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree, but I do think it is growing more and more each year, especially as people reflect on Dr. King's life and his work and where we are in this country. You see across the country more and more, I think, that the celebrations in various cities, the breakfasts, the dinners. I was at a big award ceremony Friday night in Tuscaloosa, and awards are given. And then you have the day of service that's also part of the long weekend. All of that has been expanded over time. So I think you're right, and I'd love to see it get more reference, but I think it's growing, and more people are recognizing it and actually taking the day off, and that's a big deal too.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about African American history, Chris Rock does a bit about taking African American history and everything being about Martin Luther King Jr. and when we did our civil rights tour, there was so much more to the history of this country and the civil rights, but a lot of it was around Dr. King, and we were in your neck of the woods down in Birmingham. And I'll never forget, the Civil Rights Institute there in your backyard, where they have the jail cell that Dr. King was behind, where he wrote the letters from a Birmingham jail. And I just remember touching that bit of history, going, is there a way for this country to move forward and not have this kind of division?
Well, look, there is, but we've got to want to do that. First of all. I think people talk about that a lot, Rick, but they really don't want it. They like the division. They like us against them, our team versus your team, and they want to win. And I think that has gone way, way too far at this point. And there are ways to do that. And you touched on an important piece of this, and that is the letter from a Birmingham jail that Dr. King wrote in 1963. It was smuggled out of the jail on bits and pieces of paper, newsprint, napkins, you name it, and had to be pieced together by his secretary. And it really was, he had long since been released from the jail before it was really ever published in the summer of 1963. But that document is one of the most important documents I think this country has ever had. That short of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, it is an incredibly important document. And it lays out exactly the whys, the wheres, and how I think people can come together in a bond and a mutual respect. And if people would see that, I guarantee that, Rick, that not enough people in this country have even read that letter. It's a lengthy letter. And, when I was in the Senate, we started a tradition of reading that letter on the floor of the Senate. Every year, 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats read it. Sherrod Brown has picked that up and doing it. I think it starts from the teachings that Dr. King espoused and so many others, and that followed that. And we can get back to that if people want to do it, if they truly want to get back to there. And I think that's the tougher part, is getting people to realize how important it is to do it.
Yeah, I go back to, since I like quotes sometimes, the quote attributed to Jay Gould, I can pay half the working class to murder the other half. And race is one of those dividing lines that the wealth class has always been able to use to keep people divided. And you look at one of the things that's happened, in this country over the last 40, 50 years, the re-rising of inequality and the poverty that's happened. And race has been at the heart of that division. And in my view, and maybe you'll agree, the only way that I think we bring inequality back to the sane is that we heal that racial divide.
Yeah, look, Rick, I think that divide has expanded so much as America became a more diverse country, whether it is African Americans, Hispanics, the Asian population that's growing. I think as America grew as a country and became more and more diverse, and that's just, and that includes, folks who are born of interracial marriages, it all comes into play. And as that has happened, there has been more divisions based on race. I think people are afraid. People are scared. They don't want to see what they have or have had, and they believe this country was built in a certain way. They don't want to give up this perceived power that they have, or this perceived place in this country. And the fact of the matter is, this country, I think, was somewhat always destined to be a multiracial, multicultural country. That we were the melting pot. There was a reason we were the land of opportunity, more so than any country on the planet. And so people came to this country and they worked hard. And I think that as we continue that diversity, it is a tension. And it's a tension that I think we've got to teach people and learn the respect, but also teach people that we should celebrate that diversity. It makes us stronger. I am absolutely convinced it makes us stronger as a people if we can celebrate that equality and celebrate that diversity. But it's just damn not easy, especially when you've got demagogues on one side who are just exploiting those divisions. That is a huge problem that we've got in this country right now. The people in power who want to exploit those divisions for their own political purposes.
Yeah, and you've got the other ones who are just in it for the economics. I look at the right wing, spin machine. I look at the echo chamber, who it's all about the daily outrage, and the race card is a huge part of that. But let me ask you, on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day, what can we learn from his leadership, his activism? What can we learn from him, and how can we apply that so that maybe we can overcome some of these challenges, and maybe we can make some positive social and political changes?
Rick, I think there's a lot to Dr. King that we can learn from. But something that jumps out to me right now is the nonviolence, the way he went about things. He continually, from day one, preached nonviolence, preached trying to do things in a nonviolent way. And I am very concerned in this country about the political violence that we're seeing every day, the swatting that's going on, primarily from the right, but we've had people on the left that have called in those SWAT teams as well. That is going to lead to some disastrous consequences at some point. And I think if people will step back, people might agree to disagree with Dr. King on a number of issues. But the fact of the matter is, he talked about it. He discussed it. He persuaded people. He showed that inequality was not only immoral, but it was something that was holding this country back. I mean, we like to proclaim that we became a democracy when the Constitution was signed. That's not true. We didn't. It wasn't until people fully got the right to vote where we truly became a democracy. This country, as a true democratic republic, is only about 60 years old from the time of the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
And so I think we can learn if we follow not only what he was saying, but the way he was saying it and the things that he was espousing to get to a certain point through nonviolent ways. We really have to start stressing that people need to reset their political norms and their political discussions right now, and get away from anything that can be construed as a call to violence. We're seeing way too much of that right now.
Well, what role do you think each of us can play in advocating for social change, for social justice, for creating positive change? What do you think we can do?
I think it depends on where you are and what you do. You've got a microphone, Rick. I'm looking at it right here, and you do it all the time. I've been on this show with you before. We've talked privately. We've had lunch. We've talked about this, and we do these things. And you've got a microphone. Other people don't have your microphone, but they do have friends. They do have family. They go to church. They go to other civic clubs, and they need to call out. In 1963, when the bomb exploded at the 16th Street Baptist Church, there was a young lawyer in Birmingham named Charles Morgan. Chuck Morgan was one of the white lawyers who was trying to make positive change in Birmingham, the city that Dr. King described as the most segregated city in America. The day after that church bombing, he gave a kind of a speech that had just kept him up all night. It was one of those not planned speeches except until the bombing happened. And when he did so, that he essentially indicted all the establishment, the political establishment, the social establishment, everyone. And he did it in a way that was not saying that they were bad people, but they were saying that it was our silence, the silence of the good people that Dr. King talked about. We allow this happen. Every time there's a racial joke that rocks the house with laughter, we propagate and we give power to those people that planted that bomb. I think that we have to kind of call things out a little bit, even if it's people that we know and that we generally agree with. If they cross a line about any of this, we need to call them out. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it in the Democratic Party, where we've got people now that have become so anti-Semitic because of the war going on between Israel and Hamas right now. And we've got to stop that. We've got to pull people back to say, let's do, we agree that there are things happening that we'd like to see change, but we don't need to get to a point that we're calling, that we're being as anti-Semitic and putting people in violence. So I think individuals have to search a little bit deep and have to watch themselves in what they say and how they're careful. But I think we also have to engage. I think we have to continue to engage with people that we don't always agree with, get out of our comfort zone, as I said, to try to reset the norms, because we are way outside the norms that this country has been used to.
Yeah, when you talk about the violence, and you brought up the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, it's one of those moments that I will never forget. When we did our civil rights tour back in 2015, we went through the Civil Rights Institute there in Birmingham, and I've told this story a bunch of times where we went to, there was a little case that had the belongings of the little girls in it, and at the time my daughters were some right around that age, and
right.
The purses in that case could have been my daughters, and that grabbed me, and even to this day it still grabs at the heartstrings.
Yeah, no, trust me, I know it full well. As you describe it, I can see it. I've lived that. We used them as exhibits. And it's a powerful reminder of how domestic terrorism for political purposes took innocent lives. These children, those kids, those girls had not taken to the streets in Birmingham. They weren't out doing mischief. They were just innocent kids on a Sunday morning about to engage in a youth worship service. And it's a stark reminder. And I'm so proud of the way that Birmingham has come to acknowledge and accept and not celebrate, but to some extent, you can use the word celebrate. You certainly celebrate those children and the lives that were lost because they were the martyrs for freedom. And it really did arouse the conscience of this country when that happened. And what I don't want to see happen are more violent acts that arouse the country. We seem to respond to that. And I'm not saying that that's not appropriate. It is certainly just the way we responded to the George Floyd murder. But we ought to be able to do that without somebody dying, without an explosion, without a gun, without a knee on somebody's neck. We ought to be able to do that on a daily basis. And I think that that's exactly what Martin Luther King Jr. was telling us throughout his entire life.
Last word on this. What's the message of the day for folks? What do you think?
I think the message of the day is to not just celebrate another holiday by taking off work and by sitting around and watching or even working around the house. I think today should be a day of reflection. July 4th is a day of celebration with fireworks and barbecues. We celebrate Veterans Day and we go to the parks and we do these things. Martin Luther King's holiday should be a day of reflection about who you are, who we are. And I think that is something that if people would just take that time and really reflect on where we are as a country, the ideals that he espoused and where we need to be, and what we, as you said a minute ago, what can I do to make this country live up to its ideals of America and equality. I think that's the message.
Yeah, there you go. Doug, I got to take a break. For the folks watching on Free Speech TV, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time. For our radio affiliates, we're going to take a quick break and back right here with Doug Jones, the former senator from Alabama. For folks, if you miss any portion of the program, download the podcast. Always there, always available. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. And, of course, if you miss any portion of the program, get it there. Also, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com with any thoughts, questions, comments. Back after this.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, news report has it that John Kerry is going to be leaving the administration. I believe, as it says, he's going to be working on the campaign. And because there's some concerns that the campaign's not doing well. And look, I like John Kerry. I don't know that he's going to be the savior. He didn't run a very good campaign himself. So, maybe bring the other guy. What was his name? Barack something or other? Yeah, maybe bring him back. There's a thought. Maybe bring him back. I'm sure we'll see enough Barack Obama during the campaign. At least I hope so. We need somebody who can get the punchline out here. But that's why I've asked our good friend Doug Jones to stick around and share some thoughts on, the campaign and maybe what messaging we should be seeing from the administration. Because, look, there's a record here, and I think it's a darn good one. Doug, thanks for sticking around.
Thanks, Rick. I appreciate it. And I think you're right. There's a great message out there, and I think we're going to be getting it out there.
because I talk about all the time. The things that I think he is doing and has done very well. The idea that we're reshoring manufacturing, the idea that we're investing in infrastructure, the idea that we're promoting workers to join and form unions, all stuff that I've been saying for just about 20 years doing this program that we need to do if we're going to revive and reunite this country. That is the way forward. That's the pathway. That's the secret sauce of my grandparents' generation.
Right. Right. Well, look, it is unbelievable what they've been able to accomplish in 3 years. It really is. And there is always, Rick, that lag time between, the public feeling it and public seeing it. And now you've got a different kind of media that always has to qualify everything, even the good news.
Oh, it's crazy.
Every bit there's a good news, more jobs created, and then there's this and that and the other. And so you're dealing with a whole lot of things that you've got to overcome. And the one thing that I really think you're going to see more of, at least I hope you're going to see more of, I hope you see more of Joe Biden being Joe Biden, not the Joe Biden, the president behind his teleprompter, reading a speech. I want people to see him working that rope line some. I want him talking to people. The best speeches that Joe's given in the last 6 months have been those at a union hall or somewhere else where he kind of goes off that teleprompter and he talks like he's always done, and he talks from the heart. That's how you can get a message out. And I think other people have got to get it out as well. But part of this is just a process. And it's a slow process that when you're dealing with an economy and the problem that we had to pull out of COVID, you cannot turn around the ship that Donald Trump put us in quickly. And it is taking time, but it is working. He is building this economy from the bottom up and the middle out, just like he said he was going to do. It's a sea change. It is a sea change in how we approach things. And I think people are beginning to feel it. The confidence level, all the polls are showing, people are having more and more confidence. It's just, it's slow, it's gradual. We've still got 10 months or so to get out there.
Now, you said it's a sea change, and I've been saying for a while now that what we're seeing is transformational. This move away from neoliberalism, and I know most people's heads start spinning when you use words like that. This move away from the supply side voodoo Reaganomic era. We're going to offshore everything. We're going to send all of our jobs overseas and import everything. I think we've got an industrial policy. For the first time in my lifetime, I think you've got a president who's saying, "Hey, we want to rebuild here at home, and we want those jobs of rebuilding here at home to be good family sustaining wage jobs." And I think that's important. And I don't think it can be said enough and reinforced enough how transformational that is.
Totally agree. 100%, Rick. It's one thing to just to come up with a slogan like "Make America Great Again" and we're going to bring jobs back over here and not do it. What this administration has done is literally bring jobs back from overseas into the United States, as well as to create new jobs here in the United States, manufacturing jobs in particular. You are absolutely right that this is a sea change. It's transformational from what started really, I guess, as much as anything during the Reagan administration. And the trickle-down economics that we know does not work and has never helped the working people in this country, that has created the income gap, the growing income gap that we've seen over the years. That is now beginning to narrow. People are seeing that. They're going to feel that. I think, I know we've had to suffer a little bit of inflation. A lot of people, look, the fact of the matter is we had several years of just non-inflation. And I know people that are out there and that the middle class and the low income workers, that was great for them. But while they were stuck in that income level, the folks at the CEO level and the others, the stockholders, boy, they were rocking and rolling. And that gap just grew and grew and grew. And there's nothing wrong with good old American capitalism, Rick. You know that. I know that. We want workers to succeed. We want businesses to succeed because they need each other. But you've got to treat people fairly. A business is not just about stockholders and the CEOs. The business is about the people that are making the widgets, that are on the lines, that are in many cases working hazardous jobs to make sure that that business succeeds. And those people deserve the fair share. And that's what's happening here. And this administration has been bringing those jobs. The CHIP Act and all of the manufacturing jobs have been created. I think we'll have a major impact on this election going forward.
I hope so, because you've got Donald Trump running around going, when the economy collapses, I hope it's Joe Biden who's Herbert Hoover and not me, because Republicans have been wishing and hoping for a recession. Well, from the day that Joe Biden took office. In fact, they've been doing everything that they can possibly do to cause said recession. And here we are again with Republicans in the House, threatening to oust Mike Johnson, their speaker, their latest chosen speaker, because he's had the audacity to make a spending deal.
Yeah, and but I think the most important thing you said here right now is that what we're seeing is a Republican Party hoping for the worst on America.
Yeah.
Because they believe that it will help them politically. And that's time. And if you and I wish people would carefully listen to what Donald Trump said about the economy, what others are saying about not just about the economy, but when you're talking about things like, well, they're discussing an immigration package right now to try to do things. But there are people in the House of Representatives and certain people in the Senate that don't want to do that because they're afraid it will give Joe Biden a win. To hell with the fact that we've got an issue that we need to resolve. They're more worried about who's going to get the credit for it, and they're afraid they're not going to get the credit for it. Yeah. That is not the way to govern. You cannot govern. And that is also, by the way, that is not a leader. That is not a public servant. That is someone who is just looking out for their own ass.
Yeah, we see there's the other side of this. I look at it from a different perspective. You look at it as they're afraid Biden's going to get the credit and that they're not going to. I see it completely differently. I see it as, hey, this is an issue that we can win elections on. We never want a solution, because this is tried and true and tested. We can go to the well to beat them up as often as we want. We don't want a solution. We need the issue. The issue is more important than the solution. And I see that play out time and time again, which is why, again, Republicans in the House haven't offered any solutions to the immigration issue. They just keep going after Biden over what's going on the border.
Sure. No, look, we're that is a component of exactly what I said. There is no question about that. You can look at women's reproductive rights, and that was the same way for years and years and years. And all of a sudden, they barked about that for 50 years, and all of a sudden the dog caught that car, and they don't know what the hell to do with it, and they're struggling with it. And that is true about, I am convinced it's true about immigration. I saw it firsthand, especially from Donald Trump. Rick, when I first got to the Senate in 2018, I was working with a group of about 25 senators, bipartisan group. We would meet once a week in Susan Collins' office, and Susan and Joe Manchin kind of ran it. But it was one of those things where we were working to do a couple of things. We were working for on the DACA issue, and we were working on border security, just a couple of pillars, okay? Because that's exactly what Trump initially said in 2018 that he wanted to do. Maybe not comprehensive. Let's get done what we could do. And that's what this group of bipartisan senators set out to do. And you know what? After about 2 months, maybe 6 weeks, a bill got hammered out. And at the last minute, Donald Trump weighs in and says, nope, that's not good enough. I want it all. I want to do it. And he started throwing poison pills left and right. And they put 3 bills on the floor. His bill got less votes than anybody's. But at the end of the day, we lost some Republican votes because Trump said, I oppose it. And we were about 2 or 3 votes shy, I think, of getting that 60 votes. Wow. Or else we would have had more border security. We could have solved the DACA problem. And importantly, Rick, and this is something I've tried to preach, and you don't see it as much. Importantly, we could have proved to the American people that we can get some things done. And that if we can work on this one, then let's move to the next issue and do it in a way that you don't have to have these huge bills.
See, that's the biggest thing for me. And every conversation I have with conservatives who throw up their hands and say, "Oh, they're all corrupt, they're all no good." That's the thing. It's the when they talk about smaller government, what they're really saying is they want ineffective government because it's what they've come to expect. It's what's happened over the last 20 years. Things don't get done. They don't see things happening, and that plays right into the hands of Republicans who say, "Look, government can't do anything. Watch us do nothing." This House of Representatives, the worst house in well, at least my lifetime, if not in history.
Oh no, there's no question. I mean, if they want a representative government that doesn't do anything, all you have to look to is this House of Representatives. And every time a speaker gets something done, like this spending bills, like Kevin McCarthy did, the agreement with the president on the debt limit, it costs them. It costs them dearly because of these renegades that you've got in that caucus. And that is not the way this country was founded. It was not what the founding fathers intended or envisioned with the way the House of Representatives should work.
So how do we take that and move that into messaging to get votes, to get people to say, look, we can't have 4 years of Donald Trump. We can't have 4 years of Nikki Haley or DeSantis or any of the other clown show. That we're on the right path. Joe Biden's the steady hand, the calming hand that's going to keep us moving in the right direction, slow and steady, and keep us on the right track. How do we use this moment? And then maybe, I don't know, maybe increase the number of Democrats in the House so that we get some stuff done? How do we use that?
Look, I think we just have to continue to be consistent in the messaging. And we don't, and we need to make sure that we're not fighting among ourselves the way that the Republicans have been doing. And that happens way too much with Democrats. At the end of the day, we have a big tent, and that's the way it should be with the Democratic Party. But sometimes it's when things that there are some splits, we get hurt by our own. We can't get out of the way of our own self with some things and some issues. And I think if we can continue to the message about what we're doing overall, understanding that not everybody is going to agree with us, but we're looking in a positive way. We're getting people jobs. We're getting people health care. We're keeping America secure. With all of the chaos that's going on in the world that we don't have any control over, we are trying and doing everything necessary to keep NATO together, to keep our allies together. It has to be a consistent drumbeat, and it has to be a consistent drumbeat in those few, Rick, those few House districts that are going to be competitive. More and more gerrymandering is creating this problem because all of those House Republicans that are renegades right now, they only have to answer to a very few people in their district. And they don't give a damn about anybody else in the district. They answer to the far right, that base that is creating the problem, and they're not responsive to anybody else. And gerrymandering has caused that.
No, you're right. So let me ask you a last line of questioning, because I've gotten into some trouble here recently saying that I'm not fond of the idea of holding Trump off the ballot. I think he should be beaten at the ballot box. And I still hold to that. I think he has to be beaten at the ballot box. I do think he should. I think if states want to, try and hold him off the ballot, that our system allows for that. We'll go through the process. But I'm curious your thoughts on all of this.
Rick, first of all, I'm not even though I'm a lawyer, I'm not a constitutional scholar. And what I really kind of wanted to see, the guy was impeached twice, once for the very thing that they're trying to keep him off the ballot on. And if Republicans in the Senate had done their job, other than just 7 of them, we wouldn't even be having this discussion.
Truth.
Okay. And so there has to be some findings. And one of the problems that we've got is the tension that is in the Constitution about elections. And that in the first instance, it's giving states and state legislatures the power to run elections. That's what the Constitution says. But there's a caveat to it. And the caveat says, unless Congress intervenes and essentially overrides it, like we did with the Voting Rights Act. And this is something, quite frankly, I think that it's hard to leave the election of the President of the United States up to every state like this, because it is so fact driven. And I have a tendency to believe, I have a tendency, Rick, let's just face it, I have a tendency to want it both ways. On the one hand, I agree with you completely that it losing at the ballot box is the way to go here. But on the other hand, factually, there are certain things the House of Representatives and the January 6th committee did. There are ways that I think you can do it. The problem you've got is that 50 states. This is not like different qualifications to run for governor in a state, or the U.S. Senate in every state. It's a really complicated process. I think we're getting bogged down. The fact of the matter is, it is not going to get resolved between now and Election Day. He is likely to be on the ballot unless there are clear convictions on that specific issue.
Yeah, I keep saying, look, he's going to be the nominee. It's going to be Biden. It's going to be Trump. Get out there, do the hard work of making sure everyone is registered. And yes, I know in many states across this country, they're purging, they're putting obstacles in the way. We got to figure out how to go over them, around them, under them, through them, whatever you got to do. But we got to make sure that people are registered to vote, and that we get more people out to vote than they do, so that we don't have to worry about this. You got to get out and vote.
Absolutely. Voter engagement and making sure people understand the stakes.
There you go.
And what's important.
Doug, as always, I appreciate the time, my friend.
All right, Rick. Always a pleasure being with you anytime.
Thanks so much. Our good friend, former Alabama Senator Doug Jones. Want to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Should he be thrown off the ballot, or do you want the chance to go and vote him out? You want to throw the bum out? I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day that black labor leader A. Philip Randolph issued a call for a march on Washington. He proposed the march to bring attention to the employment discrimination faced by African American workers. World War II was being waged across the globe. U.S. industries were booming. Tanks, planes, weapons, and munitions rolled off production lines. From 1941 to 1945, the United States would export more than $32 billion in goods as part of its Lend-Lease program to Allied forces. It was also becoming more and more likely that the U.S. itself would enter the fighting soon. Thousands and thousands of workers found employment as demand for labor soared. The young aircraft industry saw a staggering growth of more than 13,000% during the war. But many black workers found themselves shut out of many segments of this growing economy. The Lockheed Aircraft Corporation, to take one example, had 0 black workers on their assembly lines in 1941. A. Philip Randolph had risen to national prominence with his successful organizing of the Black Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union. Now he turned his attention to war industry discrimination. He declared, "Negro America must bring its power and pressure to bear upon the agencies and representatives of the federal government to exact their rights in national defense employment and the armed forces of this country." He continued, "I suggest that 10,000 Negroes march on Washington, D.C. with the slogan, 'We loyal Negro Americans demand the right to work and fight for our country.'" His declaration helped to launch a movement. His call for 10,000 marchers grew to a call for 100,000. The threatened march successfully pressured President Roosevelt to issue an executive order to desegregate war production. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, during the break, my mind went back to the day when we were in Birmingham at the Civil Rights Institute there. And if you have a chance, by all means, stop and see the door to the prison, Bull Connor's tank. There were so many things there to see, but I think back to that display case that Doug and I talked about earlier. Even to this moment, I'm still, it still chokes me up. It still grabs me to think about the fact that there is that kind of hatred in the world, that you would bomb a church and murder little girls. I mean, and look, I fear we're at a moment right now where in the extremes on both sides, and this is the concern, where temperatures are high, red hat, blue hat, and then beyond that we have ramped up the rhetoric to the point to where you're going to get some of these lunatics to do some really heinous things. And it's unacceptable on any level. And if anything on this day, if anything we can take from Martin Luther King Jr. Day, if anything we should walk away from, it's the idea of nonviolence. Now, look, I'm somebody who grew up in a violent environment. I talk about it with my kids all the time. I've seen people shot and stabbed and beaten, you name it. I've seen all of it, and it doesn't help. It doesn't work. Now I have friends who say, well, the right uses it quite effectively. The threats of violence. Look what they did on January 6th. Look at what they do at every opportunity to intimidate. And this is where the courage to stand up in the face of the bully and stand united and say, no matter what you bring at us, we are going to stand up to you, and we're going to do it in a nonviolent way. That's courage. And in this moment, on this day, I am hoping, especially, for people who are, because I get a lot of email from people who are just, they're freaked out. The fear is, Donald Trump's going to become president, and all these horrible things are going to come to fruition. And I believe if Trump is elected, bad things will happen. Lots of bad things. I believe he will, pursue every one of his authoritarian tendencies. He will seek retribution and revenge at every opportunity. But I do believe in us. And I do believe that it'll be one term. I do believe that in 4 years, we can get through it. It will be hard. It will be bad. There will be lots of chaos. There will be lots of turmoil. But this country has been through a lot before. I do believe we'll get through it if it happens. But here's the key. The key is to make sure it doesn't happen. And this is where I'm a huge supporter of Joe Biden's. I think Joe Biden has done the right stuff. And this is where I come back to, I love the fact that his record, and I'm willing to run on his record, which has been very good. You go, but inflation. Yeah, inflation's been tough. We came out of a pandemic that happened because under the last guy, under Trump, who did a really bad job of leadership during the pandemic. You remember, closed down during his tenure. But gas was, 13 cents a gallon. Yeah, because everyone was in their homes. Nobody was driving. Supply and demand. Nobody was buying gas. The oil companies couldn't give it away. So when we ramp back up, of course, prices are going to go up. Of course, people are going to demand goods and services. Of course, inflation is going to happen. Everyone knew that was going to happen. But I think what Biden has done well is get the economy back moving. shore up the supply chain, begin to reshore some manufacturing in key areas, chips. Think about that. Get some investment in infrastructure. And I know, oh my gosh, he's spending money. Yeah, we need to invest. We have not invested in infrastructure in a long time. And for me, that's huge. And the big part is to make sure that those investments, that money that's being spent, actually gets to working people. That key component, and this is something I'm hoping that they hammer on, that he's going to usher in that understanding that if you work hard and play by the rules, you do get ahead. That work is rewarded. That work pays. For me, that's a huge thing. And I got to tell you, I like the guy's record. And as I've said before, the fact that he's moving us away from neoliberalism and moving towards some of that old school stuff that my grandparents' generation fought for, I'm all on. I'm all on the Biden train. But that means, the rest of us got to come along. Got to make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure you got your friends and your neighbors and your family members registered. If you don't want Trump in the White House, get registered and make sure you vote. Want to hear your thoughts, though? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.